Welcome back, everybody, to Natural AF. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And this is the show for you if you're interested in getting in touch with your natural AF self, coming back to the reality of who we really are. And this is a great episode to explore that because we're going to dive into human design.
Yay! I am so excited to finally drop this episode with our very good friend, Anita Toi. We actually recorded this one about 2 months ago. Then got to the end of recording and realized we needed to do a part 2, which we didn't get to record until just a few weeks ago. So we kind of had to sit on this one for a while so that we did want to release them in subsequent weeks. So it's finally here. And for anyone that doesn't know already, we were just on Anita's podcast, the Inner Awakening podcast, just a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't listened to that one, check it out. She's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, I love her show. It's such, I love the way that she expresses herself in that show. She's got a way with words and she's very just sweet and poetic. And
yeah, she's very, very beautifully spoken, very softly spoken. I actually listened to our episode and then I finally went back and listened to a ton that I wanted to hear and hadn't yet. And I messaged her after and I was like, you could actually do guided meditations. Because her voice is so calm and soothing. Like I just found myself listening to episode after episode just to like hear her voice because it's so relaxing.
Yeah, so we get into some of the basics of what human design is. There's so much that it entails, but just know that episode 2, we do a little bit more of a better job of doing a step-by-step breakdown into the different elements of it because there is a lot to human design.
Yeah, and we kind of started off with Anita's journey, and I guess we were just kind of going back and forth. It was very conversational, very flowy. And then so even when we started getting into human design, we were kind of chatting. It was just a different vibe. So we started off with just the types. So it'll just kind of just dip your toe in. And then part 2 will be more of like the meat.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this show, as always, is sponsored by our business, Natural Art Form. And at our website, naturalartform.com, you can see our available offerings there. Sign up for our mailing list if you want to stay in touch. We have some cool things planned coming up, so stay tuned to that. For listeners of the show, we give you a 10% off discount code if you want to use that. So type in the code NaturalAF10 at checkout, and you'll receive 10% off your first order.
And of course, you can support the show by liking this episode, subscribing wherever you're listening or watching, and sharing with anyone else that you think will get value out of it, that will enjoy it, and spread the word.
Yes, please spread the word and let us know what you think in the comments. That helps the algorithms, and it's also just a fun way to interact with y'all.
Yeah.
And share your personal experiences. And without more
waffling,
we'll quit the waffling there. The waffle's buttered. Let's eat it. All right. Well, simply put, let's just get into the episode.
Anita Toi is the embodiment of a modern mystic crossed with salt of the earth surf mama. She has sparkles in her eyes and sand between her toes most days. Anita grew up in a natural environment and was exposed to alternative health, healing modalities, and meditation from a young age. Over the course of the last 30 years, she has gradually refined her practice and offerings to focus on helping others align with their soul's purpose. She uses the tools of human design and astrology, a background of healing and coaching, and her intuitive gifts to gently guide seekers of truth and freedom to the self-knowledge that can unlock their creative power. Welcome, Anita. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome on.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be with you guys. I consider you friends and colleagues in this like awakening time in humanity. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Really nice to connect.
Yeah. Wild times, but amazing people that we met along the way. I think you're at the very top as far as I'm concerned with, just lovely people that I'm just so glad to have met through all these crazy times and stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what's come.
I feel the same way. Yeah. It's just so grateful for the people that we've been able to draw together at this time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like the last few years, like that's the best thing that's come out of it is all these little like community groups that have popped up and all these little like fringe groups. And we've met, I mean, and obviously, you know, Isaac and I have shared the story of how we met, and you were in Friends of the Truth as well. That's how we met you. And we met so many awesome people and friends that like we still keep in touch with, even though Isaac and I aren't in the group anymore. There's so many people that we met in there that we still keep in touch with, and just, yeah, amazing people and people that, it's such a genuine, deep connection. It's not those really superficial friendships, which is really beautiful.
I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, I've just left Friends of the Truth myself. It was just clashing with some other work that I've been doing, unfortunately. But yeah, I love those guys, and the connections I made in there were brilliant as well. And it's just so nice we've been able to continue that on with quite a few of us.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, we want to kick this off first and foremost by giving you the floor, just to share, I guess, like your most significant life experiences that kind of led you to where you are today and the work that you do.
Okay. It's always such a big question, isn't it? That you get bamboozled with where to begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it not too waffly. So I guess I grew up the outskirts of Melbourne in the Dandenongs, and I had fairly alternative parents. I guess looking back, you know, we had a few acres, bit of a hobby farm, and every animal known to man, organic gardens. They were kind of hippies. So I was really lucky in the sense that I grew up in a natural environment, and I had all of that at my disposal as a kid who was very sensitive and very empathic to energies. And it was a real, I think, savior for me to be in that environment as a child. So I think before I hit the horrors of school life, I spent most of my time up trees and building huts and, you know, making fairy gardens and things like that, playing with all the baby animals. So it was quite a blissful, I guess, early childhood. Aside from some, you know, definitely some dysfunction within the family dynamics, but I think that environment that I was in really helped me through that. And I was quite a creative kid, so I used to draw and paint and make things. And yeah, and then I feel like entering the schooling system was a bit of a dun-dun moment for me.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
And yeah, that's where things started to unravel in terms of my personal happiness and my sense of who I am in the world and what I had to offer. And just felt very like squashed and squished into a whole different paradigm, I guess, where then you start to question, you know, where you fit and and it's always like, what am I doing wrong as well? Like there was a lot of freedom in my early childhood, and then suddenly that was gone, and it was like having to toe the line and do the right thing and say the right thing. And yeah, so I didn't really ever enjoy school, even into high school. I was fairly bright, so I got by. I got good marks. I was even school captain in my last year, but I always felt kind of like I was fudging it. I was, you know, faking my way through it and, you know, smiling and just doing what I had to do to get through, but I just wasn't ever enjoying that environment. And then my 20s, I was a lot of experimentation. We'll probably go into human design later, but I'm a 4/6, and with the 6-line profile, that time up until 30 years of age is often very like haphazard and experimental, experiential. So I really lived that. I really like swung the pendulum as far as I could both ways, and traveled and worked and did some not great things, lots of booze and drugs and experimentation with things in there too. So yeah, I was really just finding myself through that time. At one point I settled and had a career in in the arts world. I was working in commercial art galleries. I'd done an arts degree with a master's in curatorial studies, so I was sort of in that world. My dad was an artist as well, and I found that to be really entertaining and then really phony and fake. I love liaising with the artists, but not so much the whole selling. But I got to do some crazy things. I remember my boss was OCD and dyslexic, and I had to write all his emails. So I was writing emails to the Prince of Monaco, for example, and
Oh, wow.
trying to sell him pieces of art and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was quite a insight into the world of the elites as well.
Fascinating.
Yeah, how they operate. We'd have functions that were only for QCs and high court judges and things like that.
Wow.
So yeah, it was an interesting time. And
What's a
then
QC?
Queen's
Court?
Counsel.
Oh, counsel,
Okay.
yeah.
For the American listeners, because
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the big bucks. Yeah. And then a lot happened around my Saturn return, I guess. So I lost my job in the art gallery and was fired in spectacular fashion in the middle of the gallery.
Oh,
wow.
It was a screaming match, the whole thing.
wow.
Yeah, and then I sort of like briefly fell apart and then wandered into an organic market store and asked for a job and got one. And yeah, I just found myself back in this whole other world, which was similar to what I grew up with, just being surrounded by organic produce and barefoot people. And I was like, oh, this is my thing. I'm happy here. That led me to go into naturopathy school, which I'd already had kind of almost a first degree in naturopathy when I was 15, 16, because my mum was studying to be a naturopath back then. She was dyslexic as well. There's a pattern here. And I was very good at English. So I was writing all of her papers for her. I was editing them, and because they were pretty bad, I was rewriting. So I was having to do the learning as well and became pretty interested in that. So I feel like I almost got a first degree while I was doing high school, and then I went and did my own later on. And ended up studying, naturopathy, herbal medicine, clinical nutrition. I did massage. I did craniosacral therapy. A whole bunch of modalities, I guess, over that next 10 years, as well as being in a relationship, having 2 kids, moving countries. A lot going on. And then over the last 10 years, I stopped practicing as a clinical practitioner about 10 years ago and went more into the coaching side of things, because I was finding it really interesting to watch my clients would almost become sort of addicted to the supplements and the herbs that I was prescribing. And they loved them, and they got results, particularly from the herbal medicine, which I was really passionate about, more so than the pills and the bottles. I had a very kind of intuitive connection to the herbs, but I was watching them rely on these substances and not really get to the bottom of anything and change anything in their lives. And for me, I was thinking, this isn't really satisfying me. It's not really helping them in the long term. I really want to get to the bottom of this stuff and start to work more with mindset and emotions. So that's where my interest went. And I did some coaching qualifications and energy healing work as well, and certifications, and sort of deepened into that whole area. And it also timed in well with being able to work online, because that was just starting to be a real thing. And because I was moving a lot, it really helped me to be able to keep working. And human design sort of came my way around 2019. And it appealed, but it didn't. It's sort of like wafted in front of my face at that time, but I didn't grab hold of it straight away. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But I love typing systems. So I've always been really interested in anything like that, like Myers-Briggs, you know, and the more corporate end, and the disc
the disc
whatever
profile.
that is. Yeah. Disc profile. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a look at Enneagram. What are some of the other ones? Anything like that, basically. I'm going to give it a go. Give me a quiz. Yes.
I so relate to that, because I was the same. I've always been interested in like profiling things, just because like for me, whenever I do like one of those tests, I'm like, oh, this is so spot on. This is so me. Like it always really resonated. And have you heard of I think it's the PH360 type test? Yeah, that one as well was one I actually looked into it, and I wanted to do they offer a course, and I was like, yeah, this would be really good to know and like be able to apply to like working with clients. But say I came across Human Design and it kind of just like trumped everything for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, a friend of mine did the PH 360, and she's a fitness instructor. So I think it did the rounds more in the gyms and the sort of more physical training side of things. But yeah, you're right. I think there's something to all of these, and I haven't really found that they clash. They all sort of seem to fit together really well. Of course, I was interested in astrology, and I'm still a student of astrology. I think that will be my my title forever, though. I feel like, you know, I don't call myself an astrologer, but it's a tool that I'm learning and that I use. And then Human Design, I came back to it and thought, oh, there's really something to this, but I'm going to just try it on myself. You know, we call it the Human Design experiment. So I love that term, actually, because that's exactly what it is. It's something that you can learn about it. You can have a chart reading, but it's kind of meaningless unless you're willing to apply it into your life in a very practical sense. You know, similar to when I was a herbalist and I prescribed the herbs, and sometimes people would put them in their cupboard and sit there and not take them. You're like, well, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
So, you know, I found the same, that some people sort of, you know, get their chart and find out what type they are and things, but then that's it. They you know, they say, oh, I'm a generator, but they don't actually apply that into their lives. So it's very different being able to do that. And I did that on myself for around 6 months, and just to test it out, just to see. And I was like, ooh, this really works. This is really cool. So then I started studying it and went pretty deep. And 2020 was a perfect year for that, because what the shit show that was around us.
Exactly.
So, I was also, unfortunately, during that year, locked in a different country to my children, which was very, very stressful. So it gave me, the human design studies just gave me this kind of thing to focus on and really get my teeth into.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that it was so recent for you, but it's like so many other stories I've heard that for people that have come across human design, where they kind of, applied it to themselves. They realized how amazing it was, and then like went and did a course and very quickly started implementing it in the work that they were already doing with people. And that's what I love about human design, is that it can be applied to so many different aspects of life. So whether it's like, you know, coaching and like personal development or relationships, because we've found that it's really helped us not only get to know each other, but just even in our relationship, just knowing the differences in how we operate, and then like how we communicate with each other and those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's really important for compassion, for just having compassion for yourself, for some of the things that are just kind of built into the way you are.
And for other people.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never forget when I learned my mum's human design. Like, it used to annoy me. And it was funny, it came into, like, the human design part came into my life, like, right at the time when I was, like, really annoyed. And I used to be like, she just becomes like whoever she's around, and it used to really annoy me. And then I learned that she's a mental projector, and that's literally like what a mental projector does. They become their environment, and that's just part of who she is. And it just gave me a whole different level of like compassion and understanding for the other. And as a projector, I'm very much all about the other. So,
well, what about you, Anita? What initially was like your wow? This really resonates with me as far as your human design type and profile and all that.
Well, it was funny because when I first read the descriptions of each one, I thought, oh, I'm a projector for sure, and then I did, put my details into the thing and out popped manifesting generator. I was like, don't know how I feel about that.
Right.
Especially because, I guess I've been in the field of natural health and working one-on-one with people in a healing, guiding sort of practice for so many years that I just thought that would be a natural fit for me. But I realized it's not, it's not about that, and that actually any type can be a coach or a healer. It doesn't tell you what you should do, and I love that about human design, that free will is built into it, and we get to express ourselves, our being, however we want to do that. So I started looking into it a little bit more, and then realized that actually there was a lot of manifesting generator traits in me, and some of them perhaps were a little bit in the shadows, and I needed to reconnect and reintegrate these parts of myself that I'd pushed away thinking were bad things, were not right. And this is where conditioning comes in, right? Because as a manifesting generator, you may have found this too, Isaac, but there's a lot of conditioning around not finishing things and chopping and changing and going from one thing to the other and jumping around. And people, particularly generators, are very hard on us sometimes, because there's this perception that we need to pick one thing and stay in the lane and see it right through and complete it. And it's simply not the way our energy is designed to work. So there can be a lot of friction and conditioning around that, for example.
Well, that's what I love about human design as well, because it brings in that aspect of conditioning. Like, we're all so conditioned by society, by our families, in some case by religions, or through schooling. There's all these different layers. But I think human design just gives that individual aspect to it, where, like, depending on your design, like, you're more prone to being conditioned in certain areas, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think for me, like, I know when I first learned my human design, it just so much resonated. And so for me, being a projector, I only have 2 centers defined, so I'm very open. And it was very obvious for me looking at that and seeing, like, where a lot of my conditioning, especially, like, because I've always been quite empathic. So just knowing, like, having that emotional center and knowing that I'm taking that in from others, and like 50% of the population have a defined emotional center. So when you're around people when you're constantly taking that in, like, it used to be very draining for me. Whereas now, just having the awareness around it, knowing that it's not mine. And sometimes, like, because now I'm at the point where sometimes I'll just feel like, I'll start to just feel something. I'm like, where did that come from? Is that even mine? And then I can, like, backtrack on, like, who I was just with, or like where I was and like the energy I was feeling, and then just be like, no, that's actually not mine. And then it just kind of, I'm not holding on to it. So I really love that aspect of human design as well.
I think that's a really, really important concept to understand, is that the open centers are exactly that. They're open, they're absorptive, and they are designed to take in the energy of others and amplify that. So you're feeling, when you have that open emotional center, you're feeling the other's emotion twice as much as they are, almost. And it can be very confusing until you explain it to someone, and then they're like, oh, right. So that's what's been going on. And then, as you naturally brought up, that question, is this mine, is one of the best questions that we can all think about in regards to our open centers. And it, simply by asking that question usually creates a shift, an energetic shift, and we can release. Sometimes it is ours to deal with, for sure. So it's not like every bad mood that comes along you can, hand off. Yes, but just having the question and then using your authority to decipher what is yours to deal with and what is not to be released is really helpful.
Yeah,
that's totally. Really powerful. I had a moment like that yesterday where we're having a discussion with some friends, and we had a topic come up that was, had a lot of energy behind it for some of the people talking about it. It was like to do with chemtrails and stuff, and depending on where you're at and how you look at it, the chemtrails, it's something that's literally hanging over our heads. And some people, and I'm still now kind of peeling back, like, okay, was my feeling, because I'm aware of how I have an open emotional center and I can absorb someone else's feelings. And then what I interpret it as, this is like negative angst, like it feels like anxiety, it feels like, like wanting to fight, like all this stuff. Did I say that back to them, or should I say that back to them? Like, I'm feeling that you're like this, because it's not me, but I can actually feel it. And in the past, I would just get swept away in that emotion and just be like, and not know where to direct it, because I was coming in from a different perspective, and I was like feeling this like angst and anxiety come up, and I'm like, I'm not actually like mad at him. I can feel he's mad at them for like spraying stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling it, and I'm trying not to direct that energy back to him as anger and being like, just stop bitching about it. But it was like, it was a dicey conversation, but being aware that that's a thing is very new for me. And it can be tricky in the moment to navigate that. But it's a lot better having conscious knowledge of it than just being completely oblivious. Which is why I think one of the aspects why human design is so important to take a look at.
I love that example, and it made me chuckle a bit thinking of just all the, as you become more conscious about who you are and who you're not, and the people around you and what can be going on with these interactions, it can almost become like so complex that you're in the moment kind of going, oh, is that my inner shadow? Is that his emotion? Is that what am I projecting? Am I it's like, it can get kind of crazy. But I love that it's putting this whole new lens on this stuff for you, and you're able to, I think what it can do is allow us to take a breath and maybe step back rather than our usual kind of fast emotional reactive or reactivity, which, and I think that's something that has also been developing with us along this awakening journey too, because in 2020 things were like crazy and intense, and a lot of us were in that emotionally reactive state. I know I was. So it is also, aside from human design, it's also just a part of our awakening journey and level of consciousness, and the fact that we're all doing it together is really nice. Yeah.
So for someone that's new to this, where do you recommend they go look up their chart? And is it something easy that pretty much anyone can do, or do you need like a professional reading right off the bat? How do you go about it?
Well, anyway, that feels good to you. But yeah, you can go and get your free chart. mybodygraph.com is the place that I send most people to. But yeah, just there's actually an app on my phone that I use too. I think it's it just might be like My Human Design. There's a bunch of places, so just type it into Google free human design chart. So it is important. You'll be asked for your date, time, and location of birth. And the big question is, do you need to know the time? Short answer is yes, you do, for the accuracy of your chart. There is a couple of things you can do if you have no idea of the time. There's a process called birth time rectification through an astrologer who specializes in that. it will cost a few $100s, and it's a big process. So basically they have to go back through your life history and any major events, and then they'll look to what the stars and planets were doing at that time.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and try and piece it together and get that time sort of locked in for you. So it is a very specialized thing. That if someone wants to be as accurate as possible, I would suggest that. If not, sorry,
yeah, I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, because I've done this for a couple of people just recently. You can also just like put in, like if you don't know the time, I've just put in the date and then like flick through sort of the different times throughout the day, because usually it's almost always the same type. I think I've only ever done it for one person that it was a different type at different times of the day. But then just different aspects of the chart may change at different times, but it's usually you can still get a pretty good idea of like what the general stuff is.
Yeah, so that's what I've told people as well, is that, so sometimes people will come to you and they'll have no idea. Other times they'll go, oh, I know it was somewhere between 2 a.m. and 3:30. And that's really helpful because it does narrow down that window. So then what I usually do is run a bunch of charts over whatever time frame, even if they say, oh, I know it was in the evening or I know it was in the afternoon. It's still kind of helpful to narrow it down from that 24-hour period.
Sure.
I'll run a bunch of charts, see what changes, what stays consistent, and I tell them that I can read to the consistency, and I have to leave the other stuff because it's just not. It's sometimes you can guess, because what usually changes is the profile. And when you get to know a person or they start expressing certain things, you can kind of like take a pretty good guess, but I always have to do it with that caveat. This may not be completely accurate, but you're right. Most times the type is identifiable, and most of the centers and gates usually stay the same. Sometimes they change. Profiles change quite readily over the course of the day. And I have had one client where just freaky stuff was going on in the sky that day, and the type, everything changed the whole time. So I just said to him, look, I can't really read to that, unfortunately. But that's rare. And then on the astrological side of things, unfortunately, a lot changes with time. So it is more important. Like, for example, if I'm looking at natal astrology charts or astrocartography, time's really important. It changes a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking this whole topic of the time and how exact it matters. Because sometimes by 1 minute, it's like not night and day, but there's some really profound differences between your chart 1 minute apart.
Yeah.
And being from, like, I worked on the medical side in the Army, and I was in the room, not when they were giving birth, but I was supposed to work the birth ward during part of my clinical rotations. And thinking about that, they're all the nurses and doctors are trained as soon as a baby's born to look at the clock and write down the time.
Interesting.
That's not, they're not doing it consciously for astrology, but that's probably the most important reason why you would take the exact time and why it would have to be as soon as a baby's born. But I was also just kind of thinking, like, well, since they don't know that it's best to take it like the moment the baby takes their first breath or whenever the exact time should be, I wonder, how often they get it right, how often they're off a few minutes, like they might have forgotten that day.
Well, I don't trust the medical system with anything, so I'm not going to trust them with time and birth either.
You bring up a really interesting question, and that could be a variable. Hey, there could be a bunch of things going on in that room at that time, and it doesn't get recorded correctly as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone that's really hardcore and gung-ho about this, you might just go and look up the birth time what do you call that, reclamation or something? Or?
Now I've forgotten it. Rectification.
Yeah.
But there's also, there are potentially other ways. You could use tools like muscle testing or hypnotherapy, possibly.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that. We've used muscle testing. My mum didn't know her time of birth, and I just muscle tested her. I would suggest to people, though, if possible, if you know how to muscle test or you have someone that can do it on you, like I would suggest doing it like you muscle testing yourself, because in the past my mum had other people ask and muscle test kind of on her behalf, and she got like 2 different times from 2 different people. And then when I muscle tested her, we got a different time again. But, you know, I just feel like if you're really tapped into, you know, yourself and you trust that you're getting the right time, I think it's probably more accurate coming from you.
And that's a good point. Like I always ask people, what's your feeling? What's your internal knowing when you came into the world? Because I think that, you're already giving your client that permission to be empowered to have self-knowledge as well, which is really helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's kick it off with, let's go through the types, because like you said, that's even if someone doesn't know their time, but they can like run, put their data in just for the day and check different times. Usually the type is what remains the same most of the time. So do you want to run through the different types and sort of their characteristics?
Cool. And you guys can help me. So jump in. So there's 5 types in human design. Some people may say that there's 4 because originally when Ra brought the information out, generators were under one umbrella, generators and manifesting generators. However, most people now talk about there being 5 types. They're not split equally in the population. So we don't have 20% of the population in each bucket. What we have is 2 types that fit under that generator umbrella make up 70% of the population. So we've got generators are about 37%, manifesting generators about 33%, I think that's right. Manifestors are around 9%, projectors 20%, and reflectors are only 1% of the population. So if you know a reflector, they're very special.
I'm yet to meet a reflector that I know. We've got a friend of ours actually that we're like, we really want to run his chart because we're pretty sure he's a reflector. And I find reflectors really fascinating, but we'll get to that.
They are. Yeah. Well, we can start with that.
Okay. Yeah.
So, so reflectors are very special because they are the 1%. They have all of their energy centers are open. So the energy centers, when you're looking at the body graph or the chart, they are like the little shapes that look like chakras, essentially. And there's 9 of those. So in the Hindi system, there are 7 chakras. And in human design, it was said that 2 of those chakras split. We call them energy centers. And so there's 9. A reflector has all open, all color. So they're all white when you're looking at the chart. White equals open. And when they're colored in, we say that they're defined or they have definition. We'll talk about that later, but reflectors, therefore, are very open and empathic to energy from others in every center of their body. They're here to basically reflect back, be mirrors, if you like, the health and well-being of the community, of their environment. And so they're the only type that are said to be lunar types. Also, so they operate on a lunar cycle, and therefore their authority or the way that they make their decisions is that it's best to wait for an entire month, a lunar month, to go by, because the energy is going to be different for them and come through their centers and their gates differently through the course of that month. And then they'll have a better idea of what it is they want to do. So this is obviously big decisions. You know, they don't, if they're little everyday things, they don't have to wait a month. But so it can be a real thing when you describe to a reflector that that's their ideal process. There may be some pushback because we live in a society that's not all about waiting and patience and giving yourself time. it's very much like, you know, go, 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 got to make the decisions. So that can be a lot of the conditioning that they have, is to make decisions fast and then just feel completely pressured and stifled in that way.
And so each type has its own signature and not self-themed. So do you want to quickly explain that and then go into the reflector's signature and not self-theme?
So, so we're talking like an emotional sort of signature, and reflectors are designed to feel surprised.
And that's like what will kind of be expressed when they're living in alignment, right, with who they really are.
Yeah, that's it. It's an interesting one when we go through these. So when we talk about the not self, it can be applied to the type and then to the centers as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's surprised as being delight, I guess. That's the way that, because surprise is some of the terms in human design are quite odd. And there is definitely some people who are very purist about the way that they're interpreted. I'm a little bit more open to different people's interpretations and then putting my own sort of spin on it as well. I think that over time, information does get naturally changes and morphs, and as long as it's respectful to the original and sort of enhancing it or providing value, but not completely changing it, then I think it's okay. But each to their own with that. You know, some people are very like hardcore Ra followers. Yeah. So projectors, I think maybe you should describe projectors, Alexa.
So projectors are, we're 20% of the population. We're non-energy types. So like Anita said, that generators and manifesting generators make up 70% of the population. So all the other types are non-energy types, because generators are defined by having a defined sacral center. So anyone that has a sacral center is a generator. And if you're not, you're either a projector, manifestor, or reflector. So projectors, so our aura, so each type has a different aura in the way that it expresses. So the projectors type is focused and penetrating. And for projectors, it's really about like we really see deeply into the other. So for us, our strategy is to wait for the invitation, because as you could imagine, if you're going around seeing very deeply into others, it can be quite off-putting. And if it's not wanted, that's when, like for projectors, if they're doing that when it's not wanted, when it's not invited in, they'll feel the not self theme is bitterness. So they'll feel rejected. And when they're not living in alignment, or they're feeling that the not self theme is bitterness. And it's very important for projectors to be really recognized and seen for their gifts, and to be invited in to share those gifts with others. Our signature is success, which I really relate to, because I think, again, when I learned my human design, there were just so many things that resonated. And that was definitely one of the things for me, because that's kind of what's always driven me. I'm not driven by like, you know, monetary wealth as such. I'm not, and there's like, I've done so many different things in my life where I've really like always strived to kind of do really well. And that for me is what it was. It's like, it's success. And that's for me how I kind of gauge like if I'm doing well at something, and if I'm, not just if I'm doing well at something, but for me, it's like, if I've got that feeling of success, I'm like I'm on the right thing. And that's like, it feels good for me. So that's the main points about projectors. Have I missed anything, Anita?
You've done so well. And I love the fact that I invited you, projector, to share your projectorness, and you've done that perfectly. So it's it's a case in point. It's a good example. Yeah. And I guess that we miss the aura with the reflector, but just to quickly circle back, the reflector has an aura that is sampling, so it's continually sampling the energy of others to sort of work out and gain wisdom on like who they are.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And I've also heard, Anita, actually, I want to ask you about this because I've just heard this recently on a couple of podcasts. And actually, it was the most recent one was with Sophie and Yerasimos talking about human design. And we've had Yerasimos on his episode 12. We're recording with Sophie soon. And they were talking about, so with reflectors, well, not just with reflectors, sorry, but with the open centers, it's also thought that when you reincarnate, like if you reincarnate, we don't know all the answers, but like the idea is that when you come in with open centers, they're kind of like the areas that you have kind of like learnt lessons in already in previous lives. And so when you come in with the open centers, you've kind of like learnt the lessons in those areas, and then your defined centers are where you have to learn lessons. I don't know if I've explained that right, but is that something that's taught in, like, is that one of Ra's teachings? Is that like a interpretation of something?
I haven't heard that. So I don't know exactly where that comes from, but as you were talking about it, I was thinking, oh, you could almost see that in reverse as well. Like that, because to me, the open centers are where we're learning who we are and gaining wisdom over time, whereas the defined centers are where we already have quite a consistent way of being and a knowledge of ourselves once the conditioning is stripped away. So I would almost think it would be the other way around.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't know definitively. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard it for the first time I think it was actually on a webinar on the Living Free platform. And that was the first time I'd heard it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then Sophie and Yerasimos just talked about it recently. And I was like, it's a really interesting concept. But again, it's like some people don't even believe that we reincarnate. So, you know, if that's the case, then
just
throw it out
that,
the window.
I just heard, was it Mike Winter, Bearlando, talking about it? But he's pointed out a couple of important things as far as scientifically how they have like documented evidence of people being reincarnated, and it goes all even to specific birthmarks that they can look and see in the past to an exact person that a person now has memories of, like firsthand memories, and they find this other person with the exact identical birthmark with that experience that this person was living.
Interesting.
So I think, I would agree if these stories are evidence, then that would point to yes.
Yeah, I've heard that about the birthmarks, and also that the birthmarks could represent a way that they were injured or were killed, perhaps in a past life. Like there's some evidence linking with certain cases on that. It sounds fascinating. I haven't dived into it. So people do have their own belief systems around reincarnation and not. When I'm doing a reading, I actually like to ask that. Just, you know, kind of suss out where they're at with that, because there's different ways of explaining things no matter what, you know. So if they're believers in reincarnation, then I can talk about the nodes, the south node, as being things that have come in from their past lives and not. And if they're not all about that at all, then it's cool. It's just what you're working on in the first part of your life, and then what you're you know, growing into in the second part of your life. So there's different ways of working with people no matter what their belief systems are.
Yeah, and I think it's still relevant, because then another school of thought is that, I don't know, I've always believed in reincarnation, but now I'm kind of coming to a point where I'm kind of questioning, just because like we don't know everything, and like it's impossible to know those kinds of things like with absolute definitive truth in this realm anyway. So now that I'm kind of questioning, there's another school of thought that if you do past life regression, it's not necessarily your life that you're experiencing in the past life regression. It can be ancestral, because we carry all of our ancestral memories as well. So I'm like, yeah, maybe that's a part of it too. But to me, that's still relevant, because if we're carrying all this ancestral memory and genetic memory, and there's things that need to be healed, it's still very relevant to us in this life if it's coming up for us in whatever way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, let's pull it back around to where we left off on the chart on the
Well, let's
types.
do manifestors, and then we'll go to generators. So we'll do all the non-energy types first.
Yeah, great. Because I love that you explained that 30% of the population are called non-energy beings, which doesn't sound great, but it doesn't mean you don't have energy, by the way, because you're borrowing that energy all the time off other people's sacrals. It's just a different way of using it, and it's a inconsistent source of energy when you have that open sacral. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. It's the inconsistent energy. Like, again, that was such a game changer for me, because again, we're so conditioned. Well, obviously, you know, and I've heard this term, we live in a generator world because that's the majority of the population. So there's lots of conditioning for the non-energy types to live like that, to be like, go, 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 go. And because the generators are kind of like the energizer bunny. That's often how they're described, because they've got this endless source of energy, and it's just like they can just go, go, go. But for the non-energy types, we're very conditioned to live like that. And that's kind of what society, the way that society's kind of conditions us as well, because, you know, you go and you get a job and you work 5 days a week and you work 9 to 5, and like that's just like the norm. But for me, just learning that I'm not an energy type, but also just like, yeah, that I do have my own energy, but it's inconsistent. So for me, it's like now just knowing that it's like, well, you know, I can just show up to each day a little differently. Like, even when I plan on, like, if I've got work to do and stuff, like some days I can sit for hours and sit and focus on one thing and like do that. Whereas other days I can't. And, you know, or some days I'm like really energetic. I want to get out and I actually want to move my body. And then some days I'm like, I just want to just hang around the house and just not, and like, that's okay. And just knowing that that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's okay for you guys, projectors, manifestors, and reflectors, to work less as well, like to focus your work hours into a smaller amount of time. You know, we've really been conditioned with this whole slave culture, I guess, post-industrial kind of mindset that, if you're not working like 9 to 5 or even more, many people do many more hours than that. Then you're lazy, you're not working, you're not doing enough, always that not enoughness. So it is a game changer, you're correct, for any of you guys with the open sacrals to learn that. And often when I'm explaining it to people, there's a visible sigh of relief in their bodies. They're like, oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that they've never been given that permission to pull it back and to hone and focus their work time, or recreate their working days and lives in different ways, rather than think that they have to do it in that sort of typical generator way.
Yeah. And it's such a game changer for like having, like when you have kids, because I mean, that's I'm already so excited. I'm like, I just can't, like, I'm so happy that we have this.
Let's get to the manifestor first, and then we'll get into the kids, because that's like a really...
Well, we'll get into that whole topic. But just what you were saying, like just with the conditioning, like not having this knowledge from your child, like from birth, is because they're not going to get so much of that conditioning from like literally the time they pop out of the womb, which so many of us have experienced in our lifetimes. So yeah, and we'll definitely go more into, you know, applying it to our children, because we want to know how.
This is going to be a 5-hour podcast now.
I know, I was just thinking we might have to do a part 2, which I'm totally down for.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a part 2.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into manifestors.
So manifestors are our initiators, and they're our pioneers and fire starters, and people who are here to really just have the ideas and get things going. Like, you know, take an idea and just like bang, put it into form. So generally we're all taught that that's the way we need to operate, that we need to just like have an idea and do it. And, you know, what are you waiting for? Like, get it done yesterday kind of thing. And there's only actually a very small portion of society who are designed to work like that. And even when I say manifestors, it's not the full 9%, because many of them are emotional authority manifestors that have that inbuilt need to wait to see what's right for them. So, but in general, when they do have an idea or something that they want to sort of get started, and the energy comes through and it feels right to do so, they have an incredible ability to literally manifest that into being. Yeah, it's really powerful to watch. So there, I don't know if you can hear that background. There's some party going on next door to me.
No.
Okay.
I did a good job blocking it out. Yeah.
Oh my God, can you hear all that beeping?
Oh, a little bit. It's very faint though.
Okay, it's really loud on my end, but anyway.
So the strategy for the manifestor is to inform, which makes sense, right? So they get an idea, and interesting that you said like it's like a waiting. So I've heard this explained by another human design analyst or whatever you want to call them, that really all the strategies are about waiting. Because even though the manifestor strategy is to inform, so it's when they have the idea to inform others, because manifestors aren't meant, again, they're a non-energy type, they're not meant to do the work. It's to inform others, and really like the generators are the builders. Like they're the ones that go out and make things happen and build whatever it is and make it come to fruition. But I've even heard it explained, even for the manifestor, it's actually waiting for the idea to come. It's so for the projector, it's waiting for the invitation. For the manifestor, it's waiting for the idea and then informing the other. Yeah. And then we'll get into generators, but their strategy is to respond, but it's waiting to respond. So it really is like, I think for all of us, it's a big lesson in, just like slowing down and like waiting for things to come to us instead of like constantly putting out and searching and putting our energy out into things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things that I learned to put into practice in my life when I was learning about human design, was to just put the brakes on and wait and hold back and stop pushing for things. Yeah, it's made a huge difference. But yeah, the manifestors in particular, so their signature is peace. All they want to do is feel peace. And their not self is anger. And I always like to explain that this is not necessarily anger at another person. It's a disruption in their flow that causes that like explosive, like, So manifestors, when they have the inspiration, they do like get really into their flow. They're often in their heads, I find, as well. Being married to one, I see a manifestor in action, and it's been a real process actually educating him about informing, because it doesn't always come natural to them. They are so in their heads and often tuned into their own sort of stuff that they start moving in the world and everyone else is around them kind of going, whoa, what's happening, So teaching them just to voice what it is that they're thinking, feeling, about to do is an absolute game changer. Like you guys were saying earlier about relationships, it's such a game changer in relationships and can bring that compassion, understanding and peace within partnerships, families, work situations, because they have a very powerful aura. It's sometimes referred to as repellent as well. They're the kind of people who will walk into a room and everyone notices on some level, even without saying a word. There's this really powerful presence about them that's like, whoa, okay, what do we got here? That informing is great.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually use, and I'm going to totally credit, this was Sophie Fletcher, who we're also going to have on very soon. She actually used this analogy, and it's such a great analogy because it's kind of how I've always pictured it. So with manifestors, like they're pretty much like, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and it's like, get out of the way. If you either get on board or you get out of the way. That's manifestor energy. And with that fixed and repelling aura, it's kind of like, so the analogy that Sophie used is it's kind of like a boat in the water. So the boat's going through, it's got this massive thing, and it's literally, you're literally either going to get on board or you're going to get, like, you better get out of the way or you're going to get hurt. And so that's why it can be such a strong energy that it is really, really important for them to inform, because even if it's just like little things like, I'm gonna I'm gonna go and do this now. I'm gonna go and, like, it's just that people can feel the energy. It's like very strong around them. So just letting them know like what you're doing, what you're planning on doing, it can just make that energy less intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, one important aspect is it's not asking for permission from others before you do something as a manifester. You're right. They are literally going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's also giving the manifester permission to take responsibility and do what they're going to do, but simply informing in a polite, respectful way to the others around you that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So last but definitely not least, generators. And obviously, so let's maybe talk about generators first, and then we'll kind of move into manifesting generators, because they're kind of a hybrid.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
Behind us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear that. Yeah, or at least the party stopped behind me. But so generators are, how did you describe them before? The Energizer bunnies.
They are the Energizer bunnies of the world.
the little powerhouses that are here to create and build and do what they love, and really to create and build all the things in the world that we need, all the material things and the systems, and they can do anything that they put their hearts to, I guess. But the important thing is to follow that sacral urge of what makes them feel alive. What do they love doing? And of course, that's another thing where conditioning comes in, because we're taught from a young age of what's acceptable work and what is not. And a lot of us are peeling off the layers of that much later into adulthood. So, it's certainly, and we'll get to the parenting, but as generator kids, all you can do is just let them do what they love. Hey, it's a happy generator is an absolute delight to be around, because their aura is open and warm and a happy generator doing what they love is someone you just want to go and hug. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So they are designed to feel satisfied in the world with what they're doing and who they are. And the not self side of that is frustration. And every generator that I've ever explained that to goes, oh, yes, I can relate. So frustration can happen a couple of ways, though. It can happen by going against that sacral urge of what's right for you and what's not, or emotional urge, and forcing yourself into a role or into a type of work that you just don't love, but you think that that's the good thing to do. It's where the money is, or whatever, for whatever reason. Eventually frustration will become a big part of that experience. But the generator also learns and operates through, I guess, a series of like inspired leaps in knowledge and energy and inspiration, and then plateaus. And then it will have to sit on the plateau for a little while before a next kind of leap comes. So that plateau part, there can be frustration that creeps in there that might be felt as impatience as well. Why is this taking so long? Even explaining that sort of stair-step process to a generator is helpful, because they immediately recognize that that's how life has been for them and will continue to be, and that the frustration isn't necessarily a bad thing or something we need to get rid of. And that applies also to all of the not selves, like the anger that comes up with manifestors, the bitterness. They're not things to ever want to completely eradicate or get rid of. We don't need to do that. They're simply indicators of where you've perhaps gone off path, or you're pushing too hard, you're not waiting, you're going against something with your authority or with your strategy. And it's a great indicator to just like pull you back into yourself.
Yeah, totally. That's what I was going to say. I find, again, that was one of the things that really resonated for me, because that's when I'm feeling like really, really down, it's like I feel bitter and resentful. And usually it can be towards myself, but definitely towards other people. And now the way that I see it is if I'm feeling that way towards someone, a lot of the time, like recently I've noticed if I'm feeling that way towards someone, I shouldn't have them in my life. Like I'm out of alignment keeping that person in my life. But sometimes it's just if I'm feeling that way towards someone, like say a family member, it's like there's something that needs to be sorted. And it's usually, to be honest, it's usually something I'm like, I need to go and apologize for this, or I need to like, sort this out. And it is a really good indicator. And again, in relationships, like knowing Isaac being a manifesting generator, which still falls under all of the generator qualities, knowing that his not self theme is frustration, I can actually pick up in him when he's getting frustrated with something. I'll actually say to him, do you really want to be doing this? Like if you're getting so frustrated by it, like don't do it. If it's work or something, I'm like, I'll do that task. Like I'll do that instead. You pick up on things as well where you're just like, no, I'm not meant to be doing this, because he just feels really frustrated and it doesn't light him up.
Yeah. And I'm definitely tapped into like, I think I just have a natural knack for following that sacral, There's been times when I haven't followed it now I'm aware of it, but I'm like, because you can physically feel it and it's just that, I don't know, it's like an intuition thing, but it's just like, like I shouldn't have agreed to do that. And now I regret it. And now I'm pissed off. Or now I'm like, and then it's like, okay, just recognize that and be willing to let go and not chop and change so much.
Just pivot.
But just pivot or let go of things, and to also be okay with other people being upset about that. Cause it's like, well, you started this and you agreed to this and now you're changing your mind. And it's like, if I continue doing this, it's going to be miserable for both of us. Like,
that's
a perfect segue into manifesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, roll into it. Keep going, Isaac, because it is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't have all like the cognitive stuff. When I hear the manifesting generator stuff, sort of told by someone else, I can kind of resonate with it, but I don't.
What's your experience of it?
Yeah. Well, I think I get a little bit confused with the manifesting part, because some of the stuff you said about manifestors I can kind of relate to, but on the generator side, having that consistent energy, like it's definitely been my experience. Sometimes we can get tired like everybody else, but we'll do things sometimes simultaneously. Like we'll have a lot of projects going, and we'll just fire through it. It's just like this, like a freight train just going through and just accomplishing stuff. Some things we just kind of leave to the wayside, but whatever really lights us up, literally nothing can stop us from completing that, unless something catastrophic happens or whatever. But it's because I've done changes where I've not known how to come by the money or the plan, or it's on such an insanely short time frame that it's impossible. But I'm just like, that's what I want to do. Everything in me is pointing in this direction, and then everything either moves out of the way, which I think goes to that manifestor side, or I attract in all the pieces and sometimes in a like miraculously short period of time to accomplish that, whatever the project, as long as I'm really lit up by it. It's like it just manifests and happens.
And you've also got, which we'll get into the centers more soon, but he's also got a defined root center. So he's got that, like, he's got his defined sacral, so he's got the energy, but then he's got that defined root that just like gets shit done. That's like, he deals really well under stress and pressure, and he just like
pain, broken bones, like it's not going to stop me.
And it's funny, actually, I was just thinking so if everyone listening, Isaac and Anita are both manifesting generators. And as I was actually thinking, I was like, oh, well, you can see just from this conversation, it's not really followed like a linear, progression. And that's kind of that manifesting
generator. That's probably why we jumped all over the place. I find on my podcast when I'm interviewing another man-gen, it's always the way we just leap around from topic to topic and then somehow end up circling back, and it could possibly drive some of the other types mad. But that's what happens.
Yeah, because would you say that's one of like sort of like for me when I think about the difference between generators and manifesting generators, that's kind of one of the main differences is that it doesn't, like man-gens don't really follow kind of a linear pattern with anything really. Like when they're doing things in life, they'll just jump from one thing to the next and kind of chop and change, and like they're very comfortable with that.
Yeah, we are not linear, and and trying to be put in a box to be so just doesn't work. In my experience. So yeah, absolutely. The way that we learn. So instead of that stair-step process, manifesting generators are here to learn to be very efficient about time and to cut corners and cut to the chase. Like we're really good at cutting through the crap, if you like, to figure out what's necessary and what's not. However, in this process, we often skip steps and go from, A to Z, and then have to circle back again and, go through steps B, C, D just to get our proper foundations in place. So that can be a thing that's not necessarily a flaw because it's part of our design. And in that process, sometimes we figure out, well, we don't need that bunch of steps in the middle. Or it is the ending that's kind of important. But it's just what happens that sometimes we'll race, past something and then need to kind of revisit.
I'm just laughing to myself because it's a point of contention between Isaac and I so much of the time where he's just like, his saying always is, begin with the end in mind.
I was just about to say that.
But that's fine. That's a great saying. But he wants to begin with the end in mind and then just go straight to the end. And I'm just like, no, we need to. And I'm like I'm very linear. I'm like, we need to do this step and then this step. And then it's like, to me, it's just like this natural progression. But in saying that, again, human design isn't about, because people often ask too, like, oh, are we compatible? And like, it's not really like, because some, like with astrology, I know like some astrological signs are more compatible than others. So they say, but in human design, it's really not, no types together are more compatible than the other. It's just about having the awareness and having that compassion for each other and then just knowing the different ways we operate. So in that sense, I think now, like us working together, we complement each other pretty well in that sense now, because I think now like he can skip the steps, and the steps that he's skipping is like, I'm like, I'll do that. I'll do these, like, these things in order of how they need to be done. And he can kind of work in the way that he works. And, sometimes it does drive me a little crazy sometimes, but again, just having that awareness of like, that's just how he operates. I'm not going to try and change him. I'm not going to like berate him for it. And then just kind of, for me, I just feel like I can kind of fill in the gaps a little.
Yeah. And for both of us to appreciate each other for our strong suits and to trust and know that you're not going to line up, but trust that her supportiveness of my mission and objective, like let's say with natural art for my business, beforehand I jumped ahead and I was focusing all on e-commerce, and then she's very intuitive and was like, well, we should start with the markets. And that was a really important step to go back to, where it's like, let's just fundamentally do that together. Mm-hmm. And then the e-commerce stuff is also there, but I've jumped ahead. I've kind of prepared that ground, and then now we're back building up the foundation that's going to support that. And I've learned to
I love that example. Yeah, that's really great. And I actually wrote down your quote, begin with the end in mind, because that's such a perfect manifesting generator motto. It does happen. I mean, I've been known to build an entire IKEA bookcase very fast without looking at the instructions backwards. It ended up being completely wrong. And I had to... I should have probably dismantled it and done it properly, but I decided, fuck it, I'm just going to cover it with pot plants and
just screw in some L brackets.
I love it. So it's probably all the manifesting generators that hate IKEA furniture, because they just want to skip right to the end and get it all wrong.
yeah, that's funny.
Oh, it's so good. And I think we might have just skimmed over it, but for both generators and manifesting generators, their strategy is to respond, and again, it's a waiting process. And I think that's probably a big, for everyone, I think, but especially for generators, I think part of the conditioning of generators is, again, to initiate, because they have all this energy. It's like, well, if you've got an idea, you got to go and do it. But it's not, it's actually waiting to respond to what's happening around them, like, and what's coming into their field, because responding can be to anything. Like, it could be like you get a text and you need a reply. It could be like a butterfly butterfly floats past you and you're going to follow it and, see where that leads you. Like it literally can
or
be
even that
anything.
internal voice. Sometimes you get a prompt from the spirit, and then if you're tapped in and you listen to it, you can interface with your design strategy.
Yeah, responding. And I think because generators have this beautiful open enveloping aura, it's really, they are bringing things in. So it's like, what are you bringing in, and then responding to that.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, actually. Yeah, and I think I'll correct one little myth, I guess, that, and this is one of the things when I mentioned at the beginning that when I found out I was a manifesting generator and not a projector, as I thought, a lot of the stuff I'd read on manifesting generator types were that they were like mental, just like completely chaotic, hectic, like going at a million miles an hour in a million different directions. And whilst it's true that, I am a supreme multitasker and I do like to have a few things on the go, my energy, as you can probably hear, is very calm and grounded. And yours is too, Isaac. When I met you, that's one of the first things I noticed. And in fact, Alexa talks at twice the rate that we do. So,
Well, I may not have my sacral defined, but my throat is definitely defined.
I think that is your energy center.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing too, because most of the projectors that I know and have worked with are incredibly expressive and eloquent and have very strong developed throats. So yeah, there's I guess a few things in the sort of general descriptions out there on the interwebs that I think, oh no, that's a little bit generalized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I love again about human design, because you can look at the types, you can look at all the general stuff, but when you actually go really deep into it, and I'm still learning, like I say, I do basic readings for people now because I know enough that I can read a chart, but I'm still learning the gates and and the channels and how they interact, and the astrological, on the designs, the conscious, what's it called, the personality side and the conscious,
soul design,
and just learning the astrological interactions with the gates, and it's so complex, but that's what I love about it, is that we are all such unique individual beings. And you might have the same type as someone, you might even have the same profile, but your chart is still going to be very unique to you. There's not going to be, or actually, wait, I could be wrong. Would twins have the exact same chart? They're probably the only people in the world that would have the exact same chart.
Yeah, so it's interesting because definitely some twins have the same human design chart. However, because it's incorporating of, spirit and a soul and past lives, and if you believe that, and then the experiences and the perception that they put on their life experiences, they're going to end up completely different and individual. Their expressions of that chart will be different.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to finish off with tying this back to kind of the theme of the show, natural AF. And you said you started, one in the garden as a child, and then later in life found your way back to being around health and herbs and remedies and stuff like that. And I'm just curious, I know there's a linkage here, but I'll leave it to you to describe. But how does human design help us with it could be health, psychic health, mental health, and then just getting in alignment with who we were born and made to be?
Beautiful. Well, I think it's a brilliant tool for that. So in my experience, and I know in both of your experiences too, it's just sort of opened a new door of self-knowledge. And what I love about human design is I find it's very holistic. So it teaches you mind, body, spirit awareness, because it speaks to the energetics. So how we are designed as energetic beings. It can tell you a lot about health. And of course, health is not this separate thing on the side. It's who we are being, like, every day on a daily basis. And it's those small decisions, and it's those, it's not just the diet, what we're putting through our mouths, but it's everything around us, everything that we're consuming through our eyeballs, through our ears, who we're letting into our friendship circles and our environments, what we're consuming on the internet. So I think having a system like this, where you're getting to know who you are on all of these different levels and at a deeper level, it just helps you start to make better decisions around your health and around what's good for you and what's not good for you. And then there are the specifics that you can look at in the chart as well, with the arrows, the primary health system. You can go sort of deeper into that side of thing as well, and your ideal environment. There are things that you can use human design to tweak, I guess. But at the very most basic level, it always comes back to strategy and authority. And so learning those two things and then implementing them in your experiment and seeing how that goes, you're going to find that health and wellness just it's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Beautifully put. Love
yeah.
that.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Anita. We will definitely do a part 2. We've laid the foundation now, and the next episode we can just jump right into all the good stuff, because there's so much more to explore. And honestly, we could do 5 parts, really. There's so much in human design that you can explore. And that's also what I love about it, is that you can go as deep as you want. You know what I mean? If you just want to learn the basics and just use the strategy on authority and, just the qualities, learning the different qualities of your type and applying that, amazing. And it will benefit you so much. But then if you want to go further into looking at your centers, your defined and undefined centers, and looking into your activated gates, you can go so deep into it. And it's such a beautiful tool for self-discovery and self-knowledge. So thank you. And in the meantime, where can people find you if they want to work with you or any of your offerings that you have?
Beautiful. Yeah. So I just have a website that's my name, the W's, anitatoi.com, anitatoi.com. I have a podcast as well called Inner Awakening that's on Spotify and Apple and the major things. On Instagram, I am Inner Awakening with Anita. And yeah, all the stuff is there. I'm always open to receiving emails. So I welcome anyone to reach out that way if they would like to. And I want to thank you guys so much for your time and for having me on. It's been such a pleasure. I'm only a little bit disappointed I didn't get interviewed by Trump today, but...
Oh, he'll be back, folks. He's always around somewhere.
Doesn't he do the best Trump? I have watched the blooper reel, guys. If you haven't seen it, go to our Instagram, Natural AF Podcast, and watch the blooper reel that we posted. I've watched it 20 times. It cracks me up every time. His Trump is just amazing.
It's right up there. One of the best.
I've got a good ear. I can hear stuff.
Yeah. You do.
So
you do indeed. Maybe next time. Yeah.
Next time. But we've got your links. We'll put them in the show notes. So go check those out. Thank you so much, Anita, for joining us. And
we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
So part 1 is a wrap.
Yeah. Great conversation. A little bit all over the place, but I enjoyed it.
But
it's the Man Gen way.
That is the Man Gen way, and I was just along for the ride. So, but I loved it. I love Anita. I loved hearing more of her story. So stay tuned for part 2 next week, and that's where we're really going to get into the meat and bones of more human design aspects. There's so much to get into, but we're just going to go through the basics. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you then.
Yes. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you on the next episode of Natural AF.
Bye, guys.